questions. So I'm just introducing one of the big debates from an environmental economics to ecological economics perspective, and this is one of weak versus strong sustainability. So weak sustainability essentially has the idea that natural capital is substitutable with manufactured capital, whereas from an ecological economics or a strong sustainability perspective, we say that natural capital is not equal to manufactured capital, that rather it's a complement. And so an example is trees. Trees provide a use which is lumber, for example, and so you could say that these plastic carbonate planks are substitutable for the lumber that's created from trees, but clearly a forest system is much more complex and has much more use values than just that lumber. So just a bit of a background. The idea of substitutability comes from a neoclassical approach, and it kind of is this idea of the age of substitutability, and then was really brought into dominance with Robert Solow in 1993. And so just around this idea of what do they mean by substitutability, it's the idea that you can have the same use by substituting different manufactured items. So in this brief history, it kind of goes from the Big Bang through the sun is the first example of light, and then fires being a substitution for the light that you get from daytime, and fire is better because you can have it at nighttime as well as during the daytime. And then you have the lamps, which is a new technology and substitutes the fire or like a torch, and then to candles, to a gas lamp, all the way through to OLED lights. And so there's all of these substitutions for the same service, which is light, that happen over the years. And from a neoclassical or a weak sustainability perspective, we could continue to do that forever into the future. So where this became a debate is really around the Rio Summit and Agenda 21, when the idea of sustainable development became a very prominent idea within the global psyche. And so what the debate is around is how do we define sustainability, or it's the sustainable part of development. So from a weak perspective, you would say that the aggregate capital, so natural capital plus human capital or manufactured capital, that aggregate amount, we want to have a stable aggregate amount over time. Whereas from the strong sustainability perspective, sustainability is about maintaining the potential for future generations to use, to have access to the same well-being that we have right now. And I'll get into this a little bit further. So with the idea of decarbonization, some people would say that there's a potential for convergence, and I think we can question that. And I think I'll leave that idea to the question period. So limits to substitutability. So there's qualitative differences. Manufactured capital is generally reproducible, and so when you destroy it, it's not necessarily irreversible. You can kind of reassemble the component parts into some other thing. Of course, there's losses throughout, but the main idea is that there is a potential for reversibility within manufactured capital that doesn't exist in the same way for natural capital. In particular, the stocks of natural capital as opposed to the flows of natural capital. Those are usually irreversible changes that occur, especially when we consider the time scale. So if we take fossil fuels for an example, it takes millennia for fossil fuels to be created, and so that time scale is really not within our human time scales representative as a reversible phenomenon or something that can be replaced. And so also within this is the idea that we don't know enough about the complexity of our natural systems, or we don't understand them enough to know what we're really losing when we destroy them. So even if we had some system to recreate a tree system or something like that, are we recreating exactly what it was, or are there aspects that we just don't understand and can therefore not recreate? So also, it's not a chicken and egg situation. There's no riddle. Manufactured capital requires natural capital. You can't manufacture anything without having the fundamental natural materials, and Josh talked about this at the beginning. And so really that means that natural capital is the basis for manufactured capital, and that's why we say that it's complementary rather than substitutable. So in terms of intergenerational equity, this is really, again, this idea of so there's the aspect of the idea of not being able to understand the full complexity of what we're giving, we're removing what we're giving up future generations to have. So there's this quote that's really great from the United Nations Development Program, that we cannot ask future generations to breathe polluted air in exchange for greater capacity to produce goods and services, because that would restrict the freedom of future generations to choose clean air over more goods and services. So you're restricting, you may be providing them with more abundant goods and services in the future theoretically, but you're restricting their choice or their potential for what they would want to choose. And then within that is also the idea that if natural capital is the foundation, will there even be additional goods and services in the future for future generations to utilize? So just to kind of get to some main points around strong sustainability, when we argue for strong sustainability, it's not saying that we should not use natural capital. It's saying that these are critical systems that we don't fully understand, and again, this idea of thrift. So if we don't understand it, we want to use as little as possible in order to have a high quality well-being for humans. And so it's really to emphasize that we're not saying don't use it, it's just to say, like, let's be smart about how we're using natural capital and thrifty about the way that we're using it. And I think you guys understand the complexity, and so the thriftiness and also the precautionary approach. So this is a final kind of slide to show the differences. I'm just gonna leave this here, and I'm happy to provide the slides in the future. It's a good kind of tool or resource to understand the differences between strong sustainability and weak sustainability. And I'll leave it for questions so that we can kind of have a more robust conversation about all of it.